The second I heard the front door of my ranch house splinter and crash open, I knew trouble had come calling. My heart pounded as I grabbed the shotgun from behind the door, but before I could even chamber around, a mob of HOA board members stormed into my living room like they were raiding a drug den. Leading the charge was Victor Hayes, the self-appointed HOA president, clutching a bright red piece of paper and barking orders like some wannabe general. "By order of the Willow Creek Estates HOA," he shouted, "all privately owned firearms are now banned. This is a mandatory gun seizure for community safety." I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. Was this some kind of sick joke? My ranch, a sprawling 30-acre spread passed down from my grandfather, wasn't even part of their precious HOA, so I thought. Before I could protest, two board members yanked the shotgun from my hands. Another shoved past me toward the hallway where my gun cabinet stood, keys still dangling in the lock. I lunged forward, yelling, "You can't do this. This is theft. It's illegal." Victor just smirked. "Inside the HOA, your so-called Second Amendment rights don't mean a thing. Read the new bylaw we voted in. You're done." They raided my home like I was some criminal, emptying my gun cabinet, me dad's old deer rifle, my collection of vintage handguns, even a Civil War replica musket that hadn't fired a shot in a century. They piled it all into a beat-up HOA maintenance van parked outside. Neighbors gawked from the gravel driveway. Some looked horrified. Others just shook their heads like it was no big deal. I stood in a cloud of dust as the van peeled out, Victor grinning like he'd just won the jackpot. "Better get used to it," he sneered. "You're under my rules now." Then he was gone, leaving me staring at the empty cabinet, fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. What I didn't know then was that this was just the start. Victor's move wasn't just illegal, it was personal. He had a plan for my ranch, one that would flip my life upside down. But first, I had to figure out how the hell the HOA had claimed control over my land. It all began 6 months ago when I inherited the ranch from my grandfather, Henry Carter. Grandpa Hank had owned the place since the 1950s, back when it was just rolling hills and open fields, not a house for miles. But times changed, and suburban sprawl crept in like a slow poison. Half a mile down the dirt road, a shiny new subdivision called Willow Creek Estates popped up, cookie-cutter homes with white picket fences and neighbors who'd call the cops if you sneezed too loud. I didn't pay them any mind. My ranch was fenced off, with its own well and driveway. I figured if I kept to myself, their HOA nonsense wouldn't touch me. I was dead wrong. One day, a gold-embossed letter showed up in my mailbox, looking like an invitation to a fancy wedding. It was from the Willow Creek Estates HOA, claiming that under an expanded community covenant, my private land was now under their jurisdiction. They said Grandpa Hank had signed some vague cooperation agreement decades ago, and since the county rezoned part of the area for residential expansion, my ranch was theirs to boss around. I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. No way was I paying dues to a bunch of busybodies who wanted to dictate the color of my barn. But ignoring them didn't make them go away. Over the next few months, the HOA made my life hell. They fined me for unauthorized livestock, my cattle. They fined me for unsightly landscaping my fields. They even tried to fine me for dangerous wildlife, because deer wandered through my pasture at sunset. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just hot air. Then things got ugly. They sent a guy named Tim, their compliance officer, to snoop around my property. Tim was a scrawny dude with a clipboard, driving a golf cart like he was on a secret mission. I caught him snapping photos by my barn one afternoon. "Get off my land," I shouted, storming toward him. He jumped, nearly dropping his clipboard, squeaked something about violations, and zoomed off like a scared jackrabbit. After that, fake violation notices started arriving weekly. I kept a file of them, just in case I needed a lawyer, but nothing prepared me for what happened when Victor Hayes took over as HOA president. Victor, a retired lawyer with too much time and a hunger for power, had moved into Willow Creek 2 years ago and clawed his way to the top. His big promise was safety and security, which apparently meant banning every gun in sight. He pushed a new bylaw forbidding firearm ownership within HOA territory, even on private land. It barely passed, but that was enough for him to target me. The day they raided my ranch, he plastered photos of my seized guns all over the neighborhood's Facebook page, crowing about making the community safer. My blood boiled. That night, I sat on the porch, staring across the fields Grandpa Hank had worked with his bare hands. I wasn't letting Victor get away with this not just because he stole from me, but because I knew if I didn't fight, he'd come for my neighbors next. I needed a plan, and I needed allies. I started with the neighbors who'd looked horrified during the raid. Maybe they weren't as loyal to Victor as he thought. Maybe they were just waiting for someone to stand up. Then things escalated. A pickup truck rolled up to my house, and out stepped Tim with two uniformed goons in shirts emblazoned with the Willow Creek Estates logo. They weren't cops, just HOA muscle. Tim nervously waved a piece of paper. "This is a notice of pending eviction," he said. "You have 72 hours to vacate." My jaw hit the floor. Eviction? Before I could respond, one of the goons hammered the notice onto my front door. It was official now. The HOA wasn't just after my guns. They wanted my home. I watched them drive off, feeling more alone than ever. But something inside me stirred, a fire Grandpa Hank had lit when he taught me to fix a fence with nothing but wire and grit. They'd declared war, and they had no idea who they were messing with. I grabbed my truck keys and sped to the county clerk's office, barely making it before closing. Doris, the clerk who'd known my family for years, frowned as she tapped on her ancient computer. "You're not going to believe this, Luke," she said. "There's a pending lien filed by the HOA for $30,000 in fines for noncompliance." I felt like I'd been gut-punched. $30,000? For what? Owning cows? Doris leaned in. "It's fishy. They're claiming jurisdiction based on a 1979 agreement, but your ranch isn't even in their original charter boundaries." My heart lifted. So it was bogus. "Looks that way," she said, "but you'll need a lawyer to untangle it fast." The next morning, I went to Ben Travis, an old friend of Grandpa Hank's and the best property lawyer in the county. Ben listened as I laid out the gun seizure, the fines, the eviction threat. "They can't do this legally," he said, his voice like thunder. "Bullies thrive on fear, Luke. We'll file an emergency injunction and sue for illegal seizure and civil rights violations." But Victor wasn't done. He showed up on my porch with Tim and two bigger, meaner-looking goons. He snapped a padlock on my barn, sealing my tools and Grandpa Hank's legacy inside. "This structure is now sealed pending property forfeiture," he announced, waving a paper for the gawking neighbors to see. I lunged, but a goon stepped in, hand on a taser. Victor leaned close, mocking. "Careful, cowboy. You don't want assault on your rap sheet." I wanted to deck him, but Ben's words echoed. "Don't let them make you lose your temper." I stepped back, and Victor left with a mocking bow. That night, I woke to tires crunching gravel. 3 trucks idled by the barn, and figures with crowbars were prying at the doors. I flipped on Grandpa Hank's old floodlights, lighting up the yard like a stadium. The thugs froze, and there, behind them, were my stolen guns, piled in a truck bed. I grabbed the bullwhip from the barn entrance and cracked it like thunder. "You're breaking and entering," I warned. "Police are on the way." It was a bluff. Me phone was inside, but they bolted, tail lights vanishing into the night. By morning, I was a wreck, but I called Sheriff Daniels, a grizzled man who'd known Grandpa Hank. He sighed. "HOA stuff is usually civil, Luke, but stealing guns and breaking in? That's criminal." He sent Deputy Sarah Cole, a sharp-eyed young officer who photographed the damaged barn doors and tire tracks. "This is theft," she said. "You can't take property without a court order." She opened an investigation, warning me Victor would lawyer up fast. Then Ben called with good news. The judge granted a temporary injunction, stopping the HOA from fining or evicting me until a full hearing. They also subpoenaed the HOA's records to sniff out fake liens or rigged votes. Things were looking up, but Victor wasn't done. A black SUV pulled up while I was fixing the gate. Victor stepped out with a suited man, Mr. Grayson, a land developer. "He's offering $500,000 to vacate voluntarily," Victor said, grinning. The number stunned me, but I thought of Grandpa Hank, the sunsets we watched from the porch. "Not for all the money in the world," I said. Victor's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Luke." I walked away, leaving them in the dust. That night, Mrs. Ellison, an elderly neighbor, called in a panic. "They're holding an emergency HOA meeting to seize your property." I tore to the community center, where Victor stood at a microphone, calling me a threat to safety. I pushed to the front. "You're lying. This land isn't yours." Before he asked, Deputy Cole burst in with a cease and desist order, shutting down the meeting. The room erupted in chaos, and Victor, ashen-faced, slipped out. I blocked him. "You're done, Victor." He shoved past, snarling. "Problems get dealt with." But Deputy Cole's body cam footage and the sheriff's investigation were closing in. At 11 p.m., 2 SUVs crept up my driveway, headlights off. Masked men with crowbars jumped out, heading for the barn. I dialed 911, then flipped on the floodlights. "You're trespassing," I shouted, cracking the whip. Victor stepped out, unmasked. "You're outnumbered, Luke. Walk away." I stalled, knowing deputies were coming. "You'll never get away with this." Sirens wailed, and Victor's men scattered. I chased Victor through the brush, tripping him by the cattle gate. Deputy Cole cuffed him, charging him with trespassing, attempted arson, and theft. "This isn't over, Carter," he spat. I leaned close. "It is for you." The courtroom was packed for the hearing. Ben laid out the HOA's crimes: illegal seizures, fake fines, attempted arson. He showed maps proving my ranch wasn't under HOA control and played Deputy Cole's footage. Judge Larson grilled Victor, who admitted to ordering the gun seizure and eviction without court orders. "I find the Willow Creek Estates HOA guilty of harassment, theft, and civil rights violations," she declared, voiding their claims and remanding Victor for criminal charges. The crowd cheered as deputies cuffed him. Outside, reporters swarmed. "I'm going home," I said, "right where I belong." Mrs. Ellison handed me a pie that evening, saying, "Your grandfather would be proud." I nodded, throat tight. But I couldn't just go back to normal. Victor's corruption had hurt too many. I called Ben. "How hard is it to run for HOA president?" He laughed. "Easy, Luke. You'll win in a landslide." I campaigned door to door, hearing stories of Victor's tyranny: fines for garden gnomes, birthday parties, even an American flag. The election was electric. I spoke simply. Leadership is service, not control. I won by a landslide. As president, I banned unfair fines, required homeowner consent for inspections, and ordered an audit of Victor's reign. The sheriff confirmed charges against him: fraud, theft, arson. My guns were returned, including Grandpa Hank's musket, now in a display case. Sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, I knew the ranch was safe, the community healing. I sat in Grandpa Hank's rocking chair in the barn, tools and saddles where they belonged. The breeze drifted through open doors, and I smiled. Some things land, legacy, heart are worth fighting for. Always.